Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm with CUGC HQ and I'd like to welcome you to today's user share with the Networking SIG, their very first one, and we're so excited to have them. Today, we're going to talk about NetScaler 11.1 and CPX plus some management and analytics. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to one of the SIG leaders, Jason Samuel, who'll give you an introduction and kick things off.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. And I'm trying to bring up my screen here. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about NetScaler 11.1, CPX, and MAS. First thing I want to talk about is the GoToWebinar sound settings. Please do make sure that you've looked at your audio and you can actually hear us, either the telephone or the mic and speakers option. If you do have any questions, please do use the questions tab to ask us questions, and we will answer your questions at the end. So today's agenda, we're going to do an intro to the CUGC Networking SIG leaders. We're going to cover the Synergy 2016 networking updates. Then we're going to walk through the 11.1 firmware, the CPX, and MAS. And then at the end, we're going to open it up to a Q&A. So a little bit about me. My name is Jason Samuel. I am in Houston, Texas. I'm a Citrix CTP and an Atlantis ACE. And I've been working with NetScaler since 2006.
Hello, and my name is Marius Sambu. I work for a software distributor in Oslo in Norway, working with Citrix and NetScaler primarily since 2011.
Hi, my name's Dave Brett. I'm based in Farnham in the UK. I'm a Citrix CTA and I've been working with NetScaler since around 2007.
All right, thank you guys. So we'll just head on into it. We are going to move a little bit fast. I'm going to speak a little fast just so that we can get through the material. And we're going to start with the Synergy 2016 NetScaler product line updates. We are going to cover the Level 1 CPX and MAS in depth later. What I'm going to touch on is something different that we aren't going to cover too heavily, but it's going to be NetScaler SDWAN. That's the first thing to talk about. SDWAN used to be known under a lot of different names, but now it's actually part of the NetScaler family. And it does come in different editions here. I have deployed it. It does work very well. The best way to describe it is that it's a packet level load balancer. Another way to get people to understand what it can do in just one sentence is to just simply say it's vMotion for your network. The next thing I'd like to talk about is NetScaler Gateway Service. This is a beta. It is a gateway NetScaler as a service that is available through Citrix Cloud. It was announced, it went into beta, and we will probably see this go into production at some point this year. Another announcement that's going to be coming, another announcement that was made that's going to be coming soon is the HDX Proxy. It's kind of like Citrix Secure Gateway. I wouldn't call it a replacement. It's more of the next level of going beyond CSG. It's intended for people without a lot of networking or security background. It's for people that just want to get ICA connections working securely for their XenApp and Zen desktop environments. It is free, and it is going to be able to support up to 500 users. The last thing I want to talk about that was announced at Synergy is some of the partnership between Citrix and Microsoft. Citrix is going to be, or the NetScaler is actually going to be integrating more with Microsoft EMS and Intune, so that's MDM and MAM. We don't have a whole lot of details about it yet, but we do look forward to hearing more later this year. And with that, I will now go into the actual 11.1 technical walkthrough. So, this is the 11.0 GUI we've all come to know. It is a pretty serious, it's a darker theme, and once you get into it, I mean, you just go in and you know it's a network appliance. You just start working away like usual. With the 11.1 GUI, it's a lot warmer. It's a lot more inviting. There's a lot more white space. The font's bigger. It almost feels like it's touch friendly, and you will notice that it actually operates a lot better too. It's a lot faster. And one of the biggest things around this GUI is that there's no more double click. So let's say you have a load balance vServer. Normally you would double click on it to actually open it up and change your settings. Now it's just one single click, which really makes the GUI fly. It makes it really fast. The other thing is that right click is gone. So if you attempt to right click on an object, it's actually going to pull up the browser's right click window and not the what you would expect to see. Now you have to actually mouse over the objects and then click on the ellipsis. That's the 3 little dots. When you click on that, then you'll get the screen on the right side, which is what you would expect to see. Now this is with build 11.1, build 4714. Maybe in the future we might see the ability to right-click. So I'm just comparing the current release. Now I'd like to talk about search. And actually what I'm going to do is talk about the NetScaler features just from top to bottom along the left side. The first thing you're going to see is the search here. This is a new section that allows you to search objects. It doesn't, or does not allow you to search for objects. It actually allows you to search for modules within the NetScaler. So in this case, I have several vServers that have the word LDAP in it, and you'll see that they don't actually pull up those objects. Instead, it allows me to quickly navigate to areas of the NetScaler where I can actually adjust LDAP settings. The next big feature in the UI is the pinning favorites option. This is actually really, really cool because not only can you do anything on the left side, but you can pin favorites on any of the sub-content as well, like virtual servers, for example. When you mouse over and hit the star, it actually gets moved to the top into a favorite section, and now you can have all the commonly used items right along the top. I do want to point out that my spelling of favorites is with the O. That's the U.S. way of spelling it, and then the actual NetScaler GUI is the more universal way of spelling it. Somebody was trying to tell me that's incorrect. It's a misspelling. No, it's not. It is the universal way, and it just kind of shows that NetScaler is really a global product. So both ways are correct. Saving configs. This is actually really cool. So in the past, I mean, if you've been a NetScaler engineer for a long time, I'm sure at some point have been burned where you forgot to save your config. So I've gotten in the habit of just clicking save continuously. Like after every little thing I do, I go and save, and it's grown to become kind of ridiculous. But it actually makes sure that I actually have my config saved. So the product team has actually taken that feedback, and now they have a little button on the top right. It's a little orange dot that goes over your config, or tells you that you have an unsaved config. When you highlight over it, you have the ability to go ahead and click it. When you click it, it actually saves it and it clears it out. So now you know that there's no config to save. So I know there are thousands of mice all over the world that thank you. I know mine will. So thank you, product team, for putting that in. Entering IP addresses. This is much easier. So with older firmware, if you've ever had to copy and paste a lot of IPs into your NetScaler config, you'll know these dots kind of get in the way. It causes you to have to kind of clear everything out and then put it back in for it to really stick. With the newer firmware, that formatting is now gone, so now you can easily copy and paste IP addresses. The next thing is the auto-upload support files to inside services. This is actually a really cool feature. I've used it 3 times now successfully, and it does work very well. Typically when you call NetScaler support, once you do a little bit of troubleshooting, they're going to ask you to generate a support trace file. And now when you go in to generate the file, you actually have a little checkbox that says upload the collector archive. When you checkbox that, you can put in the case number and you can put in your Citrix ID information and hit run. The NetScaler will then generate the collector file and then automatically upload it into TAS or inside services for you. What I did notice is that if you do use the description field, please do put it in quotes, because otherwise it will try and pass that whole sentence down to the CLI and it might throw an error. So just remember to put it in quotes to get around that. Pinging from the GUI. So in the past, it's been kind of difficult for us to be able to ping using the SNP. Now, the diagnostics window, you have the ping and ping 6. You have the ability to actually choose a subnet IP in your dropdown. So any of the subnet IPs on your NetScaler, you can ping from that. TCP profile changes. So I'm just going to pick the default profile there. There are 3 new options. There's the TCP optimization mode. You can set transparent or endpoint. There's a TCP fast open option, and there's also the cubic high start, which is the hybrid start option. And you can use these if you need to. There's a new feature called load balancing profiles. So this works similar to every other profile on the NetScaler, something that you can apply to multiple vServers. And the settings for the LB profiles are on the right. It's mainly currently around persistence cookies that you can set, and around preventing cross-site scripting attacks or just being secure around your cookie. I do expect to see this feature just kind of expand beyond this too. But this is really, really cool that we have this ability now. ULFD logging, you can add your logger IPs there. We have some new SNMP alarms around GSLB. We can look at METFLAP, and then we have a couple around pooled licensing. Let's see, we have per interface, HA, heartbeat, and trunk mode. So now you can actually go to each of your interfaces on your NetScaler, and you can set the HA heartbeat on or off and the trunk mode. We have the ability to use VXLAN, VLAN maps. You can add them there. We have port control protocol. So this is more aimed at the telcos and ISPs. This actually works with large-scale NAT, and this is a whole other discussion. I mean, we could do a whole webinar on some of this, so I won't go too detailed into this. Source route cache table, you can flush it here. AAA active sync user agents. So now you can actually use this pattern set to help you build your policies. New monitors. We have the STA service monitoring. We have STA secure, and we have STA that we can use. And then we go into the actual load balancing virtual servers. We have the ability to now redirect from port 80 to 443 on the SSL or on the vServer itself. This is a pretty cool feature because in the past there's been different ways to be able to do port 80 to 443 redirects, and some are better than the others, but now you can actually do it on the vServer. You just simply give it the port, which is 80, and then you give it the URL, and it's going to redirect. I do want to point out though that this is a 302 temporary redirect, so really you have to consider what you're telling the client, to do, and also the performance impact on your NetScaler, because you have to think about the flow. So depending on what you're trying to do, this may or may not be the best thing for you to do, but just, we can talk about that later in a more expanded webinar. But I do love this feature. It is now there, and I know a lot of people have been waiting for this. Monitoring connection close bit options. So on the back-end services, when you're monitoring the health of your web servers and so on, you now have the granular ability to go in there and say exactly how you want to terminate that monitor connection. So if you have some older web apps that have been kind of flaky, that don't like seeing those monitors hit, this is the way to be able to control that. This is big. SNI support for backend service groups and services. This is something that's been available on the front end, and now it's actually available on the back end. This makes several different configurations possible now, so this is big. GSLB location management, that's new. And then getting into the SSO homepage revamp. So this is big, and I'm going to slow down a little bit now just to kind of go over this. So on the 11.0, which is what you're seeing right now on your screen, we have SSL keys on the left side, and we have on the right side the CSRs and certificates. And you know, NetScaler is a security-first appliance, and you pretty much live around SSL. Almost everything you do on the appliance. With 11.1, they have actually gotten rid of the SSL key section, the CSR and certificate, and slipped whatever was under SSL certificates under the getting started. So it's totally revamped. So now the question is, where did all this go? So looking at your whole NetScaler here, and I'm just going to bring my mouse over. Here is the SSL section, and then now we have these certificates here. They've actually broken down the certificates where you can actually see your server certs, your client certs, and your CA certs completely separate. There's also an education page right here in the middle. I think this is really cool because new NetScaler engineers, they may not fully understand PKI, they might not understand SSL, or how everything works, and this really helps to educate them from within the NetScaler itself. So you don't have to go click on the help, you don't have to go to eDocs. I really hope that this continues into other modules of the NetScaler as well. So now we jump into the SSL files. So again, we were just here under SSL certificates, and we were looking at the breakdown. Now we have this SSL file section, and here along the top we have the keys, the CSRs, and the certificates all broken down. And now here under the key section is where we actually create the keys. So this is where most NetScaler engineers are going to be living now under SSL files. When you click on CSRs, that's where you're able to create the CSR now. And you can see all the CSRs I've created. And then lastly is the certificate tab. Here you can upload and create your certs. New cipher groups. So we do have the default backend cipher group. So now this controls the SSL to the backend services. We also have the ECCDSA ciphers. And to go into that a little bit more detail, we have ECDHE with ECCDSA. We have the CBC3 ciphers that we've been waiting on. The GCM, that's big. So quite a few things that people have been waiting on are now available. We have some new media classification dashboards. Again, NetScaler is a security-focused appliance, and it's going to it's kind of making a point to be able to show some of this encrypted transaction. So it's there. We have generate SAML metadata for the SAML servers. This actually really helps build or help people build your authentication policies. So that's an important feature. And then here, the rfwebui template. This is very, very big. So portal themes is a feature that I think a lot of people love, a lot of people are using. And what rfwebui is a new template within your portal themes that you can apply. It stands for Receiver for Web User Interface. And what it is, it's kind of like X1, but it's for the unified gateway, and it's fully customizable. For those of you that don't have a lot of experience with unified gateway, it basically aggregates your clientless VPN website bookmarks, your RDP icons, your SaaS type services, and it puts them right up there along with your storefront based XenApp and Zen desktop icons for a very unified experience for your users. This is the old theme, the X1 based theme for Unified Gateway, and in all honesty, the functionality's kind of just been the way it's been for many, many years. With the X1 theme, they kind of put the X1 background on there, they used the style sheets, and made it look more uniform, but it wasn't, in my opinion, what most NetScaler engineers were wanting to see. And I think the NetScaler team really took that feedback to heart and really changed it up for this rfwebui to where it is exactly what people have been asking for. So rfwebui in action, the login page is no different than an X1 theme, and it's fully customizable. As you can see, I just changed the please log on to a custom message. And once you actually log in, it looks identical to storefront, and that's the biggest takeaway from rfwebui. And here you can see, and I'll just bring my mouse over, you have the web and SaaS apps, and all this is customizable. You can change the name to anything you want, change colors, whatever. You have your personal bookmarks, and they all appear just like XenApp or Zen desktop icons. And I purposely did not integrate any XenApp or Zen desktop icons into this. I wanted to show you what a naked rfwebui experience would look like, and this is it. There's no storefront involved here at all. This is pure NetScaler. So things to know about rfwebui. It's a single code base for Storefront 3.6 and Unified Gateway. There are no more iframes. So at that previous screen with the old X1 theme, there was a way to be able to get Storefront in there and integrate your XenApp and Zen desktop into it, but it wasn't really the best way to do it. Now everything is going to be just icons, so it's a great experience for the users. The old file transfer option is finally gone. That thing, I don't know many companies that are actually using that. It's just kind of been in the code base for a long time. My opinion, if you need to send files, please look at ShareFile. It's actually one of my favorite products right there next to NetScaler. It is a great replacement in my opinion. Email is still there, but it's an app. It's just an icon, and I didn't show it on the previous screen, but you can put that in there. The Java client for VPN is gone as well. Now, the new portal themes options. We do have one new option. We have the ability to put in a VPN plugin not installed message, so we can actually customize that message. We have NFactor on NetScaler Gateway that is much easier to get to. So I love NFactor, and again, I'm doing a direct comparison in this webinar between 66.11 on 11.0 versus the new 11.1. So I'm not going to get too deep into NFactor and login schemas and all the previews and all that cool stuff. It's really, really excellent. But one of the things that was a problem is that on your virtual servers, it's very hard to bind those NFactor policies. You would have to click the little pencil under basic settings and kind of dig through and then apply it. Now it's front and foremost, it's on the right side, you hit the plus button and it opens up as a pane. ICA latency profiles. So ICA latency profiles is a new feature. There is some documentation around there about passing these values to Insight Center, and I do expect more documentation to come out around this. We have the ability to put negotiate policies and servers in. And then the NetScaler Gateway plugin. This, as you can see, the UI is a little bit changed. I think the biggest takeaway here is that you can actually log in using the plugin without having to go out to the website. You can do it right here within the plugin itself. The next thing I want to talk about is always on VPN. This is a huge, huge feature. So what this is designed for is for companies that have laptops and users that are going outside of the company to like Starbucks or something like that. And you want them to have VPN access as soon as they log in back to the company through your NetScaler. So that's what always on VPN is. It's literally an always on VPN tunnel to your data center. There are a few options here to create an always on profile, and here they are in more depth. It's location based, so you can turn it on for remote or everywhere. You can do client control, allow or deny, or if when the VPN actually fails, what do you want it to do, what the behavior is around that. Things to know about always on. It does work with the Windows service, so it is always running, but the automatic VPN tunnel only happens after the user logs in, so the authentication has to happen for it to actually connect back to the NetScaler and establish that tunnel under that identity. It's really designed for managed Windows PCs and laptops that are domain joined. Don't let your users be local admins, because if they become a local admin, they can actually go and edit their registry and kind of mess with the plugin a little bit. So it might not be the expected behavior. So really just make sure that you think about the architecture before deploying this. RDP Proxy, we have some new client profile options around this. We have the ability to redirect COM ports and PNP devices and add an RDP listener. The biggest thing is that RDP Proxy works on port 443 of the Gateway vServer now, so 3389 is no longer needed. One of the use cases is even if your company is a big Zen desktop, Zen app environment, there are factors in the data center that you can't control. There's dependencies for Zen Desktop and Zen App like SQL or other things that you as a Citrix engineer may not have the ability to control. So if one of those suffers a failure and you're remote and you need to be able to work, you can't log into a virtual desktop. So the thing that you depend on the most may not be there. So what I see RDP Proxy personally is kind of a way as a backup system for admins to be able to get in and get into a delivery controller, get into a SQL server, whatever they need to do. But it's a single point of access that is very, very familiar to them. So that's just one use case I thought was cool and something that I'm personally looking at. But I mean, you can think of all sorts of different ways to use RDP Proxy. The next feature I want to talk about is install. This is a Nitro API that allows you to upgrade or downgrade your NetScaler. This is really cool. And Marius actually did a little write-up on this. He actually used this install API to actually upgrade one of his NetScalers, and you can go to that link to read more about it. Now, keeping in mind with that install API, take a look at what Dave has done. It's IoT for NetScaler using Nitro API and Octablue. So Octablue is Citrix's engine for IoT. It's the integration of everything. Not only does it integrate things outside of the Citrix world, but it actually integrates many of the Citrix products themselves to each other. So in this case, and there's a link at the bottom here, Dave created an Octablue flow, which is very simple. He said add vServer. When you click that button, it'll talk to his NetScaler and add the vServer, and then it'll actually send him a text message as well as an email just confirming that it's been added. So on his Apple Watch, he had this little trigger. Octablue is an app, so you can actually download it to your iPhone and even have it on your Apple Watch. So he had it on his Apple Watch. He clicks Add vServer, and within a minute, the NetScaler has added this vServer, and there's a text confirmation saying it's been added. So taking what Marius has done with the install and what Dave is doing here with the flows, I immediately ran up to my boss and said, I need to expense an Apple Watch. I want to be able to just drive into work and just take down my vServers for maintenance or be able to upgrade my entire fleet of NetScalers on the go. And he had this wonderful look on his face. It's kind of a look of horror, as well as a look of please go work on something else. Don't take down my environment. So This is very, very, very powerful. So just something that you should be looking at. There are going to be, I know the Octoblue guys are working harder and very hard actually to get even more integration with NetScaler and other Citrix products. So with that, I will now hand over to Marius, and I just want to say that I've covered maybe 60% of the 11.1 features, but we are kind of pressed for time. So I really want to congratulate the NetScaler team for doing this release. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of features and enhancements that have come out with 11.1. So with that, I will now give it to Marius.
Thank you, Jason. Just give me a presenter and we'll get started. Now, while I'm getting this presentation up and running, we got an excellent question in the chat in regards to how long should I wait until I upgrade my existing NetScalers to 11.1?
Okay, so 11.1 has come out maybe, I don't even think it's been 2 weeks. It's almost 2 weeks. It is a brand new release, really. It's a big change to the UI. There's a big change to a lot of the backend stuff. It's something you should be testing. I have personally am running it in several of my development and staging environments. I'm not running it in production yet, and it's mainly to kind of see what kind of bugs there are and what releases would come out after this, and just trying to get an idea. I do have traffic going through it. I do have users in those environments going through it, but it's not production. With that said, many companies have change controls in process as well. By the time you vet it and get it to a point where you have a change control to do this in production, there will probably be a new build and several things may have come out. So I strongly urge you to definitely be testing the 11.1, but just just kind of really vet it out.
Okay, thanks. So as Jason mentioned, initially we're gonna just type questions during the chat window. We'll try to get them answered as quickly as we can. If not, we'll get the product team to answer those we can't answer themselves. So just gonna make sure that everything's okay. So I'm gonna talk about the NetScaler CPX. Technical walkthrough. I'm just going to start and talk a little about the issues with traditional monolithic systems and go into the different introductions to microservices and containers. And then I go into the NetScaler CPX as a container and the difference between the architecture and traditional NetScaler. And then we're going to go into the CLI commands because it's a lot of changes to the CLI command. And of course, I'm going to show a demo afterwards, which is mostly CLI based to show how it works with Docker and so on. So initially, when we're talking about moving into microservices containers, we need to talk a little bit about monolithic systems. So traditionally, if you think about a simple e-commerce website, we might have web servers containing all the different modules and services running on a single web server. And then we might scale up those web servers, which are mostly virtual machines. And then we have a backend SQL server, which is then all requests are then load balanced to using our existing NetScalers. So the problem with this approach is that, let's say we come to a holiday season or so on, we need to scale up our virtual machines. We need to scale up individual services. So let's say we have a lot of customers going into the e-commerce website, which is just browsing our catalog, but not actually buying anything. So they're putting a lot of pressure on the web front end. But then we need to provision new virtual machines, and then we scale up all our other services as well. And of course, provisioning virtual machines takes time, so you lose a lot of agility. And of course, when you have all the specific modules contained on the same web server, it might lose a little oversight, makes troubleshooting more and more difficult. And of course, all the different modules are interweaving with each other, so it makes it hard to update each service without affecting other services on the same instance. So what more and more enterprise companies are moving forward is using microservices and containers. With microservices, it means that you move a module of a specific website into its own instance, which might be a virtual machine or it might be a container. Now, if we move each module to its own virtual machine, we get a lot more overhead because we have more guest operating systems running. Now, we can solve this by moving into something called containers. So containers is actually, the best way to talk about it is to compare it with traditional virtualization. So virtualization is actually hardware virtualization. So you define a set of hardware resources, and then you install a guest operating system, and then you install the services, and so on. With containers, it's actually, you can have a virtual or physical host to install a container software, for instance, like Docker, and then you split up the operating system into different instances. So there's no need for installing another guest operating system on top. So it's just running pure on the native operating system. You slice it up. It has its own namespace, has its own file system, also has its own IP stack. And then you can install different services on top of each container. So this way we can say we have easier scalability, because if we want to have more resources available to the web front end of the profile system, we can just provision new containers on top, and we can then swap out a web service with containers hosts instead. And then we can also update services independently, because then we can do an update to the web front end without it affecting any other modules on our web servers. And of course, it makes a lot more easier scaling, because we don't need to provision a new virtual machine. Now, the problem with this approach is that we're getting a lot more east-west traffic inside the data center, because in my previous slide, when we had all the different modules installed on the same web server, they could communicate internally on the same virtual machine. But in this case, they're split out into different containers. They have their own IP stack, and then they need to communicate with each other. So when a user goes into the catalog, he browses something, adds it to the shopping cart, and then that web front end needs to communicate with the profile system, and so on. So then we need to make sure that we have high availability between the different modules, and of course we need something to manage this container ecosystem that we have, because now instead of having 4 virtual machines which we could monitor using our virtualization platform, we might have 20, 30, 40 containers running, and we need to have some form of management on top. So this is where the NetScaler CPX comes in. So the CPX, which is containerized NetScaler, can run alongside the other containers that I have for my e-commerce website, the billing, the web front end, and the profile. As of now, it's supported running on an Ubuntu host, which might be a physical or virtual host. It needs Docker installed. It comes in 2 flavors. It has the CPX Express, which is free for download. Has a bandwidth cap of 20 megabytes per second. We also have the CPX 1 gigabit edition, sorry, which is license, which can be added using Management Analytics System, or we can add a license using Nitro API. There we go, just a little lag on my PowerPoint. So in regards to features, it has most of the NetScaler functionality. You have load balancing, content switching, and so on. A few things that's missing is application firewall, because that's mostly functionality you want on the edge anyways, and also NetScaler Gateway is also not supported running on it. And also, most of the Nitro API features are available on it. The NetScaler or the Nitro install API, which Jason mentioned, is not available in the CPX because it has another way to do upgrades on it. And as I said, it's supported on Ubuntu. You can integrate it with the MAS product for to do provisioning. You can also install, or you can also integrate Management Analytics System to any other container orchestration systems like Mesosphere, Kubernetes, and Docker Swarm, for instance. Now, as of now, in the current release, it's only supporting Mesosphere, but it's going to support Docker Swarm and Kubernetes later this year. And also, the CPX works with a single IP address, so it's the same restriction that we have in Microsoft Azure. So it shares an IP for the VIP, the NSIP, and the SNIP. So going back to our architecture now, we can then deploy the CPX between the different modules. So when a request comes into the catalog, it comes to the web front end container, And then when the web front end needs to communicate within the other modules, it can then go through a load balanced web on the CPX and then communicate backwards to any other modules in the infrastructure. Now, the MAS product can then communicate directly with the CPX in order to do app flow management and so on. They can also manage existing NetScalers like the MPX and VPX. Dave is going to talk more about this afterwards. And it can also communicate directly with the Docker host using the Docker Remote API, which we then can also use to provisioning and get information, statistics, and so on. But now you can see we've replaced our existing 4 web servers with a lot of different containers, and we can then spin up and spin down resources when we need to. Now, in terms of the architecture, when you provision a CPX, it's provisioned from an image that you have in the Docker image repository. So when we want to, for instance, upgrade our container instances, we need to upgrade or add a new CPX image into the image repository. When we provision our containers, it's by default getting an IP address from the internal container host, which is 172.17.0 something. And then we specify port mappings to allow external access to the containers, which we're going to show afterwards. And when you then want to run CLI commands to the CPX, you have to use our CLI wrapping command. So you use the CLI_script.sh, and then you enter the command you want to run. And when you want to access the CPX using SSH, it has another default username and password, which is root and Linux for password. But if you want to use the Nitro API, it's still nsroot. But as I mentioned, by default, it's set up in bridge mode. We can specify that the CPX should be published using a direct IP address of the Docker host if you want to. And also the CPX image will soon be available in the Docker image repository. So as of now, we need to download it from Citrix, the download site. So just to make sure everything's working, I did a pre-recorded video. So in this demo, I'm going to show how to use the Docker commands and how to download image, how to set up the CPX container. And I'm just going to spin up a couple of Nginx web servers containers as well, and just set up a simple load balancing virtual server and connect to it to make sure it's working. And then afterwards, I'm going to show a demo how to use the MAS product to provision new CPX instances on a Docker host, and then make sure everything's working and get statistics back. So just going to get started. So when you install Docker, you get a command which is called Docker, and then you use different parameters. I mean, for instance, use the Docker search command. You can then get a list of images available from the software repository from Docker. So in this case, I can go in and get a container image for WordPress or MySQL. I can also get finished templates for, or container templates for Nginx, which you can download directly. Another interesting fact is that I can also download finished containerized templates for Minecraft. So for instance, if I want to download a specific template, I can just locate the name. I can use Docker pull command, and then I can download the image directly from Docker. So when the CPX is going to be available from the Docker repository, you can just do a Docker pull command. So now I can see I have my Docker images available in my local Docker host repository. So I already have the CPX added to the image repository. So now I want to set up a new container. In this case, I'm going to set up the CPX as a container. I want to publish external ports, which is port 22 for SSH, port 80 for web, and then SNMP. And then also specify which port mappings I want to do directly on the host. So in this case, I want to add port 30,000 and 30,002. I want to map directly to the Docker host on 30,000 and 30,002. And then I specify which image I want to use. In this case, I have one installed, and now I have a container running. So if I just use the Docker ps command, I can see my CPX is running. And then I can use the Docker inspect command, which shows what kind of IP address that has been assigned to that CPX container. And in this case, you can see that I have a 172.17.02 IP address. So now I'm going to use SSH to the CPX instance. You can see the port mapping on top, which is why I use the 32719 port. And now I'm going to do a command just to make sure everything's working. And now you can see I use the CLI script wrapper to run the command. Now I'm just going to spin up a couple of web servers, which I'm going to load balance internally on the Docker host. So I'm just going to spin up an Nginx web server using the latest image that I have. So now I have 3 containers running on this Docker host. So now I'm just going to make sure I have the correct IP addresses available for each container. So by default, it starts on 117.0.2 and upwards. So now I can just go into the CPX again and start adding my web servers. So as you can see, I have to add this, I have to run that CLI.script or CLI_script for each command I need to run. And another thing that you need to be aware of, if you want to copy copy expressions that you have on an existing VPX or MPX, it might not be parsed correctly on the CPX, but this is something they're working on and which is going to be changed in an upcoming release. So I had some issues when I'm trying to add a HTTP responder policy, and I have a specific expression that I wanted to use, but it didn't work correctly as I should. But I'm going to add that to the web page. Or the blog post we're going to publish on the SIG website afterwards. So now I think I've set up everything as it should. Now you see I used the public IP port 30,000 because that's the port I published externally on the Docker host, so I can then go into the Docker host on that specific port and I can see that my load balance virtual server is working. So to make sure that everything's working, I'm actually going to access the Nitro API on the NetScaler CPX and just to make sure that it's responding as it should. So that was the CLI-based setup. So in this short demo, I'm just going to show the CPX how we can add a Docker host using the remote API and then provisioning CPX instances on that specific Docker host. So I start by adding the Docker host IP address on my Ubuntu server. I specify a username and password. Don't change the default port. And then it's going to add my CPX instances, so I can go in and see my resources, which CPXs are running, or instances are running. Then I can make sure that it's working. So it might take some time before the statistics are pulled back to the management analytics product. That's why it's blank at the moment. So if we want to provision new CPX instances, I specify the image I want to use, which can be remotely or locally on the appliance, and then I specify a port number which I want to use externally on the Docker host. And then it starts provisioning new CPX instances. So some CLI commands to get you started. I'm just going to show this initially, but in most cases you need to take a close look at the different Docker CLI commands that you want to use. And of course, if you want to upgrade a CPX instance, you need to install the Python library, which is not installed by default on Ubuntu Docker host. Other than that, I'm just going to publish this afterwards. And also, I've added some different articles, because if, for instance, if you want to use the MAS product to integrate directly with Docker host using a remote API, it's not enabled by default, so you need to configure that on the Ubuntu host. And also, you can now use Send Server 7 to do Docker management both on Linux and Windows Server 2016, because Windows Server 2016 now supports containers and so on. And I've also added a blog post how to set up the CPX on Ubuntu with load balancing on Nginx and so on. And of course, the latest link here with Netflix and microservices, more of a just to show what kind of large enterprises using this type of architecture to deliver their different services and so on. So I've covered my part now. Is there any questions that I should answer, Dave and Jason?
The only one, there's one on is CPX available for download, but you put that into your content.
Yeah, I'll add a link to the download button as well, to the page as well. And I also heard that the CPX is going to be available on the Docker image repository in a couple of weeks or a month. So other than that, Dave, I'm going to skip on over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to walk through MAS and the Management Analytics Service through this bit. I'm going to go through what NetScaler Management and Analytics System is, how easy and quick it is to deploy a MAS proof of concept. Once you're logged in, what the interface looks like, what the tabs are. Now, this is going to be a high-level view of what MAS can actually do. We're going to run another webinar in the future about the entire MAS product, because there is, as you'll see, a lot involved in it. Then we're going to look at some configuration jobs, what they can do for you, a bit about record and play, and then I'm going to attempt a live demo using MAS and Storefront. So what MAS is, it's Management and Analytics System. It's a new appliance that Citrix have released to hopefully go some way into easing the pain you have when you're managing and administering your Citrix networking estate. It's basically a single pane of glass that combines the power of Insight, Command and Control Center, and it gives you the visibility of your network in the stack. Plus, it allows you to automate and manage that estate in a considerably easier manner. It will give you granular analytics of your network applications hosted on your NetScalers, and it will allow you to identify issues within your estate far easier and with a lot more ease. As I will be showing you, it is an automation tool. Part of that is what Marius has already spoken about around Docker, and another part is configuration jobs, which I will go into detail in a bit more detail later on. And then good looking. The reason I put that is I think Citrix have done a great job in making a nice, clean looking interface. The dashboards and graphs look great, and the interface is responsive. The MAS interface is just as responsive as the NetScaler 11.1 interface, which is a lot quicker, cleaner, and snappier than its previous incarnation. And I do think that it would look good on a wallboard in an office. I think out of the box, the default dashboards you get are brilliant. They give you good information. It looks nice and clean. So deploying a proof of concept. Again, Citrix has done a great job in making this quick and easy. You can go from nothing to pretty much being able to see your entire NetScaler estate within a matter of minutes. To get a proof of concept up and running, it is literally as easy as you download the appliance, you deploy it to your hypervisor of choice. Currently supported a VMware ESXi, Zen Server, Hyper-V, and KVM. Once it's deployed, you boot it up, give it a host name and some IP details, restart it, select MAS, and then literally log in. It really is that simple. Once it's up and running and you've added at least one of your NetScalers to it, it automatically populates all the default dashboards for you and immediately gives you a nice overview of your Citrix networking estate straight away. Once you're logged in the interface, you've got 6 tabs along the top. I'm going to quickly walk through each one and give you a high-level view of what each tab will offer you. As Jason was saying earlier with NetScaler 11.1, this is a huge release. What I'm going to give you here is just a glance at what it can do. It will do a lot more in each tab. The more you work and play with it, the more you'll realize what it can do for you. So the Applications tab, by default, the Applications dashboard is going to display a high-level overview of all the apps running in your data centers. If you scroll down the screen a little from that, you'll see the health of all your services running, protocols in use, and the current state of all of your vServers that you have running. And this is default. No configuration is required from you to get this screen other than adding a NetScaler to the MAS appliance. A great feature of the app screen is this Applications button you're looking at here. What this gives you the option is to define custom applications by selecting existing vServers. So they can be load balance vServers, content switching, or GSLB vServers. And it will give you a whole load more detailed information around that vServer specifically and break it up into nice little tabs there. Infrastructure. This, again, will give you a high-level view of where your Citrix networking data centers reside and a view of the NetScalers and defined apps running within them. From that view of the global map there, you can zoom in on any country and hover over your data center, and it will give you the current event count and critical events happening within that region. Further down that screen is a snapshot of all the events happening out in your estate, the current health of your NetScalers, software versions, certificate expiry information, config drift, and as Jason alluded to earlier, and in my opinion, one of the most important is config save status. It will give you a view of whether you've got differences between your running config and your save configs out there. Again, I just want to say this is all out of the box. You don't have to do anything to configure this bar. Define where your data centers are and the IP subnets that reside in them, and then this screen is populated automatically. SSL certificates and monitoring, that can always be kind of difficult, especially if you've got a lot of SSL certs and multiple NetScalers in your estate. Keeping track of all of this can become a nightmare quite quickly, and you often miss things and miss expiry dates and stuff like that. So fortunately, out of the box, MAS will give you the SSL certs pane built into that infrastructure tab. It gives you an overview of all your certificates in your estate, the expiry dates, key strengths, how they've been signed, and a whole host of other information. And it will give you that ability and high-level view of your certificate estate without you having to drill into each NetScaler. Analytics. This is going to show and gather real-time analytics about web, HDX, gateway, security, and network services running on your NetScalers in your estate. For example, gone are the days where you have to trawl through the NetScaler logs to find out why a user could not authenticate to your gateway. This is now displayed directly in the MAS console. On this tab, you get clear, readable information about what's happening in your estate. You can pick up problems and resolve them quickly, and ultimately give your users a better experience. One of my personal favorites in this tab is the ability to analyze the active user sessions and display a graphic with a latency end-to-end from the endpoint right back to the VDA. If you were to put this in the hands of your first-line support guys, it would go a long way in resolving that age-old complaint that Citrix is slow, and if it's a network issue, this could hopefully prove where that network latency resides. The orchestration tab. On this tab, you've got the ability to expose the shared APIs between the MAS appliance and the cloud providers to automate your app delivery. It's a big plus for Citrix and gives MAS the ability to plug into so many already heavily used cloud automation services. And then the last two are just system and download. So system is where you configure your system as per NetScaler 11.1, and downloads is where you can download the references for the Nitro API if you want to follow Marius's blogs. So configuration jobs, these are found in the infrastructure tab, and in my opinion, they're massively beneficial to anyone running even a single NetScaler out there. They're basically SSH or SCP commands that are grouped into scripts and templates that can be run against any NetScaler you have defined within your MAS appliance. These jobs can be saved as templates on your MAS and then rerun at any time against those NetScalers. So that's quite good in itself, that you're no longer going to have to keep entering loads and loads of commands into the CLI or trawl around GUI, no matter how snappy it is if you need to rebuild one of your NetScalers. The other benefit of this is that you can run the same job on multiple NetScalers in parallel. So this is going to speed up the deployment to your NetScalers massively and allow you to configure lots of different NetScalers all at the same time from a single console. You can also roll back successful commands if the configuration job as a whole fails. I know from hosting the tech chat tables at Synergy that this is a big one for a lot of people, especially regarding the NetScaler wizards. So in that respect, MAS could be your answer for that. You could just build your own wizard specific to your customer needs, and then if halfway through that wizard something fails, it will roll back and rip out all of the commands that it's already executed successfully. However, one of the huge benefits, in my opinion, of configuration scripts is that you can generalize them. So taking a very simple example, if you wanted to add a server to a NetScaler, you'd run that command that I've just shown on the screen: add server, then the server name, and then the domain name, the IP address. So using MAS with that same method in mind, you can substitute the specific values for variables. Now, in the example I've just given there, you've got add server, and then you put the variable within dollars. This is going to allow you to generalize your scripts and write them for specific scenarios and reuse them in the future. And it's going to gather that information from the admin at runtime and pump that info into the scripts and then deploy that to the NetScaler. So a good example of this is building a web load balancer to offload SSL, and you want it to be consistent and secure across a lot of different NetScalers. You could build a generalized script to build your SSL vServer and then generalize that, save it as a template, and use that to redeploy that same thing to multiple NetScalers. And this is all well and good for CLI junkies, but if you don't know the SSH commands that you need to run to build out that config on your NetScaler, then MAS have introduced something called record and play. I've pre-recorded a video just to describe and show what record and play is. I'll walk you through the video while it's playing. So you create a job in the same way that you would a normal configuration job. Give it a name, and then from the configuration source you drop down and select record and play, and then select a NetScaler that you want to build out your config using the GUI. What MAS is then going to do is it's going to hand you off to that NetScaler and single sign you onto it and present you with the GUI. From there you can build out your configuration as you normally would, and this includes all the commands on the NetScaler. In the background, MAS is connected to this and monitoring all the commands that you're running on that NetScaler. Once done, you come out of the NetScaler config window, and that will switch you back to MAS, and then you push stop. This is then going off to that NetScaler and gathering all of those commands into the configuration job console. You can see them down there. You can then drag that over to your script window, and you can see every command that's been executed on there. To substitute one of your values you've inputted to a variable, you highlight the text, hover over it, and click configure variable, and then double click on that variable. Give the variable a name. Now this is a name that's referenced in the script, and then the display name is what's displayed to the admin when asking them for that information. And from the drop-down, you can select various types of fields that you want that user to be. Then you can save that as a template and use it in the future on different NetScalers. So the live demo, and hopefully this works. So what I've done, I've pre-prepared a storefront SSL vServer build script, and I've substituted all the specific values that I'm entering with variables. So if I switch back here, so you can see here I have a NetScaler MAS appliance, and I also have a NetScaler 11.1. So if we look through this NetScaler, there's no vServers defined, no services, no servers at all, no service groups. So I want to build a storefront VIP on here with SSL redirect. Although you can include that in the vServer, I'm going to use the old method of deploying a vServer on port 80 and using a responder. There's a rewrite script to add the STS headers and a whole bunch of other stuff that will get you an A+ on SSL Labs. So if I switch to my MAS appliance, hit the infrastructure tab, go down to configuration jobs and create a new job. Give it a name, and then from here you can just drag that config into the right-hand pane. And you can see there that all my variables are defined. So if I now click Next, select the instance that I want to run this on. So I run it on that demo NetScaler. Hit Next. Here, this is the prompts for the variables. So the storefront web server name, the IP address, the service group name, the vServer IP address, the store name in the background, and the certificate name. So then click Next. This is where you can roll back the commands if it's been unsuccessful, or ignore and continue. So if I click Finish there, so that is now MAS is executing those commands on my NetScaler, and typical, there's been an error. With that, in true fashion, I have a demo video. So this is just showing there's no vServers defined on the NetScaler. Go back to that infrastructure tab, down to the config jobs. Give the job a name. Drag those commands over to the right. On that, you can group your NetScalers into instance groups. So if you want to execute the same script on every NetScaler in the data center, you just select your instance groups. This is where you fill out those variables. As Marius has just kindly pointed out, type in the correct certificate name. Click Next. And that's the option to execute it in parallel if you want to run it on more than one NetScaler at a time. Then hit Finish. If you want to see the commands that were executed during that build script, if you hit Details and then click on Execution Summary and then click on the completed option, it will show you every command with the variable values that you've passed into the NAS appliance. And then if we switch back to the NetScaler and refresh the V servers, you can see them all built. The services, service groups. It's also built the responder policy to redirect to port 443. As you can see there, that's up and running. So with that, I'm going to hand control back over to Jason.
Thank you, Dave. And we're just kind of looking through the questions. We've been doing a pretty good job of answering them, and we will answer a few more toward the end of the webinar. But first, we just want to quickly go through a couple of items here going beyond this webinar. Joining the networking SIG, a lot of the members on this call, you may be a CUGC member. You have seen it this SIG advertised on the homepage, but you may not be a CUGC networking SIG member. To do that, you just go to this URL here and you hit Request to Join. Once you join, you actually have access to a lot of the content behind the networking SIG. You'll also be signed up for email reminders and so on of our events. The Networking SIG forum is something that I really want to showcase. This is really, really cool. It's a place where you can talk to NetScaler enthusiasts. So tons and tons of people are on here. And we also have many members of the NetScaler product team participating in this forum. So if you have feedback or you have questions that you want to get to the actual product team, this is the way to do it. They are very, very active. Here's an example. I'm not BSing you. This is not marketing. But somebody on the Networking SIG asked a question, and within 17 minutes, Ronan O'Brien responded back. Within 17 minutes, Ronan is one of the SEs, and he is on the NetScaler Masterclass quite a bit, and it's just amazing to see how fast people are responding. Here's another example where we have Pankaj. He's a product manager on the NetScaler team. I met him at Synergy, actually, very nice guy, and he just came back with a response that's just huge. And then you can see on the right-hand side, we have the Networking SIG member saying, thanks, that's exactly what I was looking for. And I think that really shows that that people really love this appliance. They stand behind it. They don't get paid to sit here on the community forums and answer questions for people, but they are going out of their way because they truly love the product. Another thing I want to talk about is a NetScaler Masterclass. Many of you are already attending these, but for those of you that are not, please keep in mind that there is a Masterclass webinar. It's a live webinar that happens the first week of every month. I've been going for years now, and it's hosted by the great guys on the Masterclass team. They give away cool prizes. You can learn how to do things. You can hear the latest news around the NetScaler product line, and they even bring in guest speakers. So these are people people on the NetScaler product team, there's people at other people at Citrix, and they even bring in community members from time to time and actually speak around NetScaler. So please do attend. And there, at that link, you can also see a lot of the older webinars that they've had. And with that, we will open it up to questions. If you have any topics for the next Networking SIG webinar, or if you want to do a deep dive into anything we've talked about, please let us know. And also, the CUGC Networking SIG is about you. It's for you. It's by you. So if you would like to present on a networking topic, please let us know. We would love to have you do a webinar like this. So Marius, Dave, anyone, any questions that we have?
Yeah, there's a lot of question or activity around the licensing on the mass product, and of course, a lot of people want to compare it between inside Command Center and so on. Do you have any? I've been answering a lot of questions that I have, but do you have any more clarifying information about that? Especially around Command Center and Insight compared to the mass product.
So I think by default it will allow you to monitor up to 30 V servers out the box, and outside of that you have to purchase licensing. I will find out a little bit more information about what and how that licensing looks and put it in the blog post after this webinar.
Great, and of course, if you have any topics that you want to or us to talk more about in an upcoming webinar, please let us know. Just post it and we'll take note of it, or send us an email, or post it on the forum on the SIG, because I'm going to post a forum post on the SIG containing the blog post information. So feel free to ask about any topic that you want.
Okay, great. It seems like we have quite a few questions here, and I think we will go ahead and respond since we are well over the hour now, but we will go ahead and respond with that blog post. Stephanie, I guess I'll hand it back to you.
All right. Yeah, let me take back the screen. And okay, just want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to thank Marius and Dave and Jason for presenting. It was a very informative webinar. Again, if you're not a member of the Networking SIG, please do join. You can get there through mycugc.com. Also, shortly after this presentation, we will have a recording of the webinar available for you to watch if you need to watch it again. And I've also opened up a discussion thread in the events forum where you can talk about it. But if you join the Networking SIG, and actually you can get to the networking blog, the networking forum through the forums page. So we can also talk about things there. But they will write up some answers to the questions that came in today, and we'll get those out to you. And finally, just let you know that you'll be receiving a short email survey tomorrow. We'd love for you to fill it out and get your feedback so that we can continue to plan more webinars in the future. And with that, I want to thank everyone again for coming. Thank you guys for presenting, and we will see you at the next CUGC Connect or user share. Actually, we have one next week, so look for you guys there and online. Thanks, everybody.